The battle that'll define the fate of not just Taiwan's sovereignty but the safety of the entire Indo-Pacific region and the world is unlikely to be won by sheer naval superiority. According to most military experts, the engagement will instead be defined by who of the two main combatants, the United States and China, can claim air superiority over the Taiwan Strait first. It's also the general consensus that the United States' fifth-generation aircraft, the F-35, can handily win this fight, on one condition: the availability of these fighters in the region. In the heat of war, everything can change in a fraction of a second, so it may all rest on whether America's hardy set of F-35s is in striking distance when it all goes down. But here's the thing: combat aircraft can't just perpetually float on their own. If the United States had its F-35s endlessly patrolling the airspace of the Taiwan Strait, they'd not only waste a truly comical amount of fuel, but provoke the exact kind of PRC response that the US and its allies are seeking to avoid. With that silly military fantasy out of the way, we must ask the pivotal question: if America's F-35s can change the tide of a potential conflict with the People's Liberation Army Air Force, where will they be deployed from? Before we get into all the spicy details about the new American tech slated to be sidling up to the Taiwan Strait, we first need to rewind a little bit and explore how things escalated earlier in the year. China's war of words against Taiwanese independence has multiple times come unsettlingly close to turning into irreversible action. We've seen the dissemination of propaganda and misinformation, cyber attacks against important infrastructure, and even Chinese warplanes flying uncomfortably close to the midline of the Taiwan Strait. In late January, early February, the United States and Japan conducted several days of joint naval exercises involving multiple aircraft carriers, a hot-button topic as you've probably put together by now. According to the participating carrier groups, the exercises involved air defense drills, sea surveillance, cross-deck exercises, and tactical maneuvers to, quote, advance unique high-end warfighting capability. Given both China's hostilities and the increasing frequency of North Korean bluster, the U.S. has made interoperability with its Indo-Pacific allies one of its key goals in the immediate future. Needless to say, China isn't the biggest fan of this, and the results of the joint exercises left them feeling even more bitter. Some of the key naval assets in attendance include the Nimitz-class supercarriers, the USS Carl Vinson, flagship of Carrier Strike Group 1, CSG-1, and the USS Theodore Roosevelt, flagship of Carrier Strike Group 9, or CSG-9, along with the Japanese Hyuga-class helicopter carrier, the JS Issei, and 9 other supporting vessels. According to the Carl Vinson Strike Group commander, Rear Admiral Carlos Sardiello, the U.S. and Japan, which have a mutual defense treaty, are, quote, uniquely capable of rapidly assembling multiple large-deck naval forces in support of mutual security interests in the Indo-Pacific. A joint statement from the involved strike forces also read, the CSG-1 and CSG-9 are currently deployed to U.S. 7th Fleet Area of Operations in support of a free and open Indo-Pacific. Another thing that the Chinese Communist Party was not eager to hear in the slightest. While this is a strong projection of power from Allied forces in the region, it didn't exactly succeed in lowering China's diplomatic temperature. In the last several years, there have been a number of close calls that put China and the U.S. at each other's throats. Chinese forces have often intercepted U.S. or U.S.-aligned crafts, passing through the area that they perceive to be their territory. But these interceptions are often haphazard and dangerous, resulting in tangible danger to both parties. And this isn't a once or twice issue either. According to recently declassified files from the Pentagon, there have been almost 200 of these dangerous near-miss situations, any of which could have led to a massive escalation in military tensions if they'd gone deadly. Between the Theodore Roosevelt and the Carl Vinson, which had both been stationed in the area for the exercises, and the USS Ronald Reagan, which was at dock at its home port of Yokosuka, Japan, the total number of American aircraft carriers in the region was 3. However, it wasn't long, mid-February specifically, that the U.S. was in talks to deploy 2 more aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS George Washington, into the area for a grand total of 5. Why? It had everything to do with the F-35s. Now, let's get back to warplane deployment. Of course, if we're talking land deployment, the U.S. certainly has a number of valuable allies in the region who could play host to a healthy stoke of 5th-gen combat aircraft ready to be taken on by Air Force personnel stationed at the many American military bases in the Indo-Pacific. Japan, Korea, and Singapore all make logical decisions for regional allies that would have a lot to gain from supporting U.S. aerial defense against a PLAAF assault. Japan recently invested $35 billion of their own F-35s, an incredibly worthy investment for a craft that might make the difference between victory and submission. The Philippines is also becoming an increasingly gracious host to the U.S. military, offering additional land-based deployment opportunities that could prove vital when the chips are down. The Philippine and U.S. navies even performed large-scale joint exercises in the South China Sea as an act of both preparation and power projection, much to the chagrin of the PLA. It's clear the Philippine alliance is a vital feather in America's cap. But if we're being honest with ourselves here, land-based deployment would still be a compromise, one that could shave off those vital seconds that make all the difference during modern warfare. For the U.S. to maintain a comprehensive advantage over China during the fight for Taiwan, comprehensive sea deployment is still the premier option. This leads us to the very scenario that this video is all about: 5 U.S. aircraft carriers parked in China's backyard. Simultaneously, the secret to a potential U.S. and allied victory and a dangerous gamble that could play into the start of a conflict in the first place. Because geopolitics is nothing if not terrifyingly complicated. But don't worry, we're here to break it down for you. Due to the fact that naval assets move and land masses don't, and please don't get on our case about tectonic shifts, we're a geopolitics channel, not a geography and geology channel. Sea deployment offers unparalleled flexibility, and this is something that the U.S. and its regional allies are very much aware of. Remember that massive F-35 buy in Japan that we mentioned a minute ago? The Japanese military is already equipping its warships with F-35Bs for quick deployment, but that's nothing compared to the hardware the U.S. is rocking in this regard. While the U.S. Navy's America-class amphibious assault ships can deploy an impressive 20 F-35Bs, that still looks like small potatoes compared to the pride and joy of the U.S. Navy, the aircraft carriers, each one equipped to deploy a whopping 50 F-35Cs at rapid speed. With multiple aircraft carriers in the field, plus the land-deployed crafts from the U.S.'s regional allies, you can see how the tide of any aerial battle would quickly shift in America's favor. Because of elevated tension spurred on by China's increasing military brashness and aggression in both its actions and rhetoric, focused mainly against its favorite embattled neighbor Taiwan, it only made sense to increase the number of aircraft carriers deployed to the immediate vicinity to 5, which, if you don't feel like doing the math yourself, makes for an impressive total of 250 5th-gen aircraft from the carriers alone. An incredibly formidable showing by anyone's standards, referred to in intelligence circles as a wall encircling China when added to the aerial firepower of America's regional allies. This kind of air power projection makes for a radical shift in what's known as the deterrence equation, which thus far has been the most valuable U.S. measure in preventing a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. To put it simply, if the U.S. and its allies can continually make the PLA's cost-benefit analysis for a Taiwan invasion swing way more heavily to the cost than the benefit side, the war can be prevented for another day. And according to the most recent data, China has good reason to believe that the aerial portion of a Taiwan invasion would present costs that far outweigh the potential benefits. Let's take a look at what the PLAAF has to offer when it comes to China's attempts at wresting air supremacy from their American and regional rivals. China is working with a pitifully few J-31 sea-launched 5th-gen aircraft, with a mere 100 land-launched J-20 aircraft to supplement them, up against the comparatively impressive force of American and allied craft. Even sadder, at present, China has literally no sea-launched F-35B or F-35C equivalents, leaving them woefully behind their enemies. But that's no reason for anyone to get complacent. War is a high-stakes game of uncertainty, and the only way to limit the potential risk is to consider all available factors. By law, the United States Navy has 11 aircraft carriers, almost half of which would be dispatched to counter China under this plan. Each one is essentially a floating fortress, manned with up to 5,000 sailors and a matching extreme price tag, with the newest of the U.S. aircraft carriers, the USS Gerald R. Ford, costing around $13 billion. And if China is to be believed, they may have a dangerous weapon that could nullify the combat advantage of sea deployment that the aircraft carriers provide: carrier killers. More professionally known as the DF-26 Intermediate Range Ballistic Missile, these deadly munitions have harbored a reputation for two frightening things. One is being able to reach Guam from China with its estimated range of 1,000 to 3,000 kilometers, and the other is its purported anti-ship capabilities. They are the pride and joy of the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, often shortened to the unfortunate acronym PLARF, which sounds a little like something you might say while falling down the stairs. And in 2022, China increased the number of DF-26s from 300 in 2021 to 500. With an estimated number of 250 launchers to work with, The PLARF could unleash 500 of the supposed carrier killers within one reload, an extremely frightening fact if you're one of the thousands of sailors stationed on one of the U.S. Navy's Nimitz or Ford-class carriers. In 2021, satellite imaging saw mock-ups of U.S. aircraft carriers in the Ruochang area of Xinjiang's Taklamakan Desert in northwest China, which has historically been used for PLARF target practice. It's clear that China really wants the carrier killer to live up to its nickname. Of course, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and the U.S. Navy isn't just sitting on its hands in reaction to the development and stockpile increase of the DF-26. It's instead been developing what the Navy refers to as its layered ship defense system. The first and most important tenet in the plan is the Navy's efforts to ruggedize its carrier force, a multi-pronged initiative designed to reduce the threat of the carrier killers. Carriers are being fitted with MQ-25 Stingray refueling drones, an emerging technology that will allow warplanes dispatched from the carriers to be refueled remotely, increasing their range and reducing their dependency on the carrier that deployed them. But this also benefits the carriers in the face of the Chinese missiles. With increased range, carriers can often afford to remain further away from Chinese shores, while still dispatching F-35s, keeping them at a safer distance from the PLARF launchers. Cutting-edge technology combined with collaborations with Japan has also offered the U.S. another layer of defense against Chinese anti-ship missiles, thanks to a combination of tech known as the Aegis Combat System, which utilizes common computing standards, software, fire control, and highly sensitive radar detection to locate, track, and destroy incoming enemy ballistic missiles. Because U.S. carriers operate in groups known as carrier strike groups, cruisers and destroyers are also able to take advantage of Aegis to improve their protective capabilities, using SM-2, SM-3, and SM-6 interceptor missiles to take out the carrier killers before they can complete their intended purposes. Some of these carriers are also packing rolling airframe missiles, Sea Sparrow missiles, and close-in weapon systems, which can work in conjunction to unleash a huge number of intercepting projectiles that would massively reduce a carrier killer's chance of hitting its target. There are also some more sophisticated anti-missile measures equipped on the carriers like the USS Abraham Lincoln that can stop carrier killers in their tracks without firing any projectiles themselves. There's the Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program Block 3, a technology that's able to locate and identify incoming guided projectiles before jamming their electronic targeting systems, making them unable to complete their objectives. All of this, coupled with networking technologies that interlink sea vessels, helicopters, warplanes, and satellite technology, allows an unprecedented level of coordination and operational awareness. It's a kinda technological safety net that gives the U.S. carriers the best possible chance of identifying and eliminating carrier killers, even when fired en masse by the PLARF. These carriers also are no slouch when it comes to physical ruggedness. They're built with immensely heavy armor, redundancies in their electrical systems in the event of damage, and hundreds of watertight compartments that prevent flooding in the event that the hulls are breached. The crews are even trained to work around damaged facilities in the event of a successful attack on the carriers that cause actual structural damage. The U.S. carrier strike teams also have an advantage over Chinese forces, one that the U.S. is often stated to have a holistic advantage over China: actual combat experience. Even as recently as early 2024, U.S. aircraft carriers like the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower have been repelling real attacks from Houthi militants during conflicts in the Red Sea. According to one of the captains of the Eisenhower Strike Team destroyers, they faced attacks from anti-ship ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned surface vessels, and now unmanned underwater vessels or UUVs, all loaded with explosives. The PLARF is yet to be put through its paces in a real conflict, and oftentimes genuine combat experience is one of the most determinative factors in combat outcomes, which gives the U.S. aircraft carriers just one more potential edge over their Chinese rivals. If we're all lucky, then the 5 U.S. aircraft carriers being deployed to the Indo-Pacific region will fulfill their intended purpose to keep the PLA aggression in check, bolster the strengths of regional partners, and keep Taiwan safe for another day. And given the increasingly comprehensive defenses on the carriers, they're more formidable than ever. Only time will tell if all of that will be enough to stop war from tearing apart the region and the world. Now check out why China is terrified of this tiny island group and other Chinese geopolitics, or watch this instead.